In a Zen monastery in the mountains, a young monk once came to the head priest deeply frustrated with himself. He explained that there was a habit he had been struggling to break for years, and that no matter how hard he fought against it, the habit always won in the end. He asked the priest to teach him a stronger method of fighting, some discipline powerful enough to finally defeat the habit once and for all. The old priest listened patiently, and then he said something that completely confused the young monk. He said, "You have been losing for years because you have been fighting, and here in this monastery we never fight our habits at all." That single sentence contains a piece of wisdom that almost no one in the modern world has ever been taught. We have built an entire culture around the idea that breaking a bad habit is essentially a battle, a contest of willpower between the part of you that wants to change and the part of you that does not. We speak of resisting temptation, of fighting urges, of being strong enough to overcome ourselves. And yet, despite all of this fighting, most people remain trapped in the same patterns year after year, slowly coming to believe that something is fundamentally weak or broken inside them. The Japanese monastic tradition looked at this entire problem from a completely different direction, and the methods it developed are so different from modern advice that they sound almost strange when you first hear them. The monks did not become free of their bad habits by becoming stronger fighters. They became free by understanding something about the nature of habits themselves that almost no one outside the monastery walls has ever properly understood. This video is about those methods, the quiet and unusual ones that you have probably never heard before. To understand why the monks never fought their habits, you first have to understand what they believed a habit actually was. In the modern view, a bad habit is essentially an enemy, a flaw, a piece of weakness living inside you that must be defeated and removed. The monastic view was almost the opposite. The monks understood a habit as a current, a flow of energy that had simply found a particular channel to move through. The energy itself was not the problem, and it could not be destroyed, because energy never simply disappears. The only thing that could be done was to dig a new channel and allow the current to flow somewhere else. This is the first and most important idea, and everything else follows from it. When you fight a habit directly, you are essentially trying to dam a river with your bare hands, and the river always wins eventually because it has nowhere else to go. The monks did not dam the river, they quietly dug it a new path. The first specific method the monks used flows directly from this understanding, and it is something they practiced through what could be called the principle of the replacement gesture. The monks understood that every habit has a precise physical trigger, a specific moment in which the body begins to move toward the familiar pattern. Rather than trying to stop the body at that moment, which is the modern approach and the one that always fails, the monks trained a small, deliberate alternative gesture to occupy that exact moment instead. When the hand reached toward something, the monk had already trained the hand to reach instead toward a string of prayer beads, or toward the act of straightening his robe, or toward a particular small movement that had been chosen in advance. The genius of this method is that it does not ask the body to do nothing, which the body finds nearly impossible, but instead gives the body something specific to do in the precise instant where the old habit used to live. The energy still flows, the moment still arrives, but the channel has been quietly redirected before any fighting becomes necessary. The second method is one of the most subtle and least known, and it involves what the monks understood about the relationship between a habit and the physical space in which it occurs. In the monastery, the monks observed that every habit was deeply attached to a particular place, a particular arrangement of the body within an environment. A habit was not floating freely in the mind. It was anchored to a spot on the floor, to a specific chair, to a corner of a room, to a familiar physical posture. And so, the monks developed the practice of breaking the spatial anchor rather than breaking the habit. If a certain pattern of thought or behavior always arose in a particular place, the monk would deliberately stop occupying that place in that way. He would rearrange the space, change where he sat, alter the physical conditions that the habit had been quietly relying on. The modern person tries to change the habit while keeping everything around it identical, and then wonders why the habit returns. The monks understood that a habit kept alive by its environment will always reawaken the moment you re-enter that environment, no matter how much willpower you applied. Change the field, and the habit loses the ground it was standing on. The third method concerns the monastic understanding of time, and it is perhaps the most quietly powerful of all. The monks noticed that nearly every bad habit lives inside a particular kind of moment, an unstructured gap in the day where the mind is left without direction and begins to drift toward its familiar patterns. The habit is not really a problem of the will. It is a problem of empty, undesigned time. And so, the monasteries were built around an almost complete absence of unstructured moments. Every hour of the monastic day was given a defined shape, a known activity, a clear form. This was not done to make the monks busy. It was done because the monks understood that an undesigned moment is the exact soil in which bad habits grow, and a designed moment gives them nowhere to take root. The monks never had to resist their habits during the dangerous gaps of the day, because they had quietly eliminated the gaps themselves. The modern person leaves vast stretches of their day completely undesigned and then relies on willpower to survive them, which is like leaving your fields untended and then fighting the weeds by hand every season. The monks simply planted the whole field so the weeds had no empty earth to claim. The fourth method is one that sounds almost paradoxical until you understand it deeply, and it involves what the monks called the practice of full and conscious permission. When a strong urge arose, the monks did not suppress it and did not push it away. Instead, they did something remarkable. They turned toward the urge and observed it with complete calm attention, as if studying a guest who had entered the room. They watched the urge rise, watched its texture, watched how it grew and peaked, and then always began to fade. The monks had discovered, through long observation, that an urge is not a permanent command that must be obeyed or fought. It is a wave, and every wave that rises also falls, usually within a surprisingly short span of time, if only you can remain still and watching while it passes. The act of fighting an urge actually feeds it, because the struggle keeps your attention locked onto it and keeps the energy churning. The act of calmly observing it without acting and without resisting allows the wave to complete its natural cycle and dissolve. The monks did not defeat their urges. They simply learned to sit quietly beside them, like sitting beside a fire, knowing that a fire left alone eventually burns down to nothing. The fifth method is the gentlest of all, and it reveals something profound about how the monks viewed themselves. In the modern approach to habits, every failure becomes a moment of harsh self-judgment. When you slip, you criticize yourself, you feel ashamed, you decide that you are weak. The monks understood that this self-attack was not a path toward change but one of the strongest forces keeping the bad habit alive. The reason is subtle. When you attack yourself after a slip, you create an inner state of distress, and that distress itself becomes a new trigger that drives you back toward the very habit you're trying to escape. The harsh judgment and the bad habit feed each other in a closed circle. The monks broke this circle through a practice of treating their own slips with the same calm gentleness they would offer a young student who was still learning. When a monk failed, he did not condemn himself. He simply noticed, without drama, that the current had slipped back into its old channel, and he calmly returned to digging the new one. This gentleness was not weakness or an excuse. It was a precise technical understanding that an inner climate of calm produces change, while an inner climate of harshness produces only more of the same suffering. When you gather all of these methods together, you see why the head priest told the young monk that fighting was the very reason he had been losing. The monks understood that a habit is a current of energy that must be redirected rather than blocked, that it is anchored to a physical space that can be quietly changed, that it grows in the undesigned gaps of the day that can be filled with form, that an urge is a wave that fades on its own if you can observe it calmly rather than struggle against it, and that the harsh self-judgment that follows a slip is itself one of the strongest forces keeping the whole pattern alive. None of these methods involve fighting. All of them involve a kind of quiet, intelligent design, a patient working with the nature of the mind rather than a violent war against it. My grandfather Daiki, who studied these traditions deeply, once wrote something in his journal that captures the whole teaching in a single image. He wrote that a man who fights his own habit is like a man wrestling his own shadow, and that the harder he fights, the more exhausted he becomes, while the shadow never tires at all. The wise man, my grandfather wrote, does not wrestle the shadow. He simply turns and walks toward the light, and the shadow, having nothing to fight, quietly falls behind him. This is the deepest truth the monks discovered. You were never meant to defeat yourself. The part of you that carries the bad habit is not an enemy to be crushed, but a current to be guided, a guest to be calmly understood, a younger version of yourself to be treated with patience. When you stop fighting and start designing, when you stop attacking yourself and start working gently with the real nature of your own mind, you discover that the exhausting war you have been losing for years was never a war you actually needed to fight. Yes, my friend, if you have been struggling against a habit for a long time and feeling weaker with every defeat, I want you to consider that the struggle itself may have been the problem all along. Put down the fight. Redesign the field instead. Dig the new channel, change the space, fill the empty hours, watch the waves rise and fall with a calm and patient heart, and treat yourself with the gentleness you would offer someone you love. This is how the monks became free, and it is a freedom that was always available to you, waiting quietly on the other side of the war you no longer need to wage. If this video helped you, I would love to hear which of these methods you want to try first. Let me know in the comments. Take good care of yourself. I hope to see you in the next video. Bye-bye.